Hello, everyone. We will get started promptly at 10 o'clock. We're just waiting for participants to join us. Okay, there are a few more joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Appreciating that you all have time schedules to keep. Thanks for joining us. This is Melinda Huntley, and I'm the director of the Ohio Travel Association. Just real quick housekeeping rules here. Because we have or anticipate close to 150 or more people on this webinar, we are going to use the chat function or the Q&A, whichever you prefer. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, please enter those using the chat function or the Q&A function. You can find those at the bottom of your screen. And we will spend some time following our discussion to respond to the questions. We will also email you the slide deck. You're going to see some active links within this slide deck. And it looks kind of messy from a design standpoint, but we did that so that when we send you the PDF, you're going to be able to link specifically to that information that we're talking about. We're also going to give you a summary of the questions and the answers as much as we're able to. So at this point, I want to welcome all of you as we discuss the governor's reopening plan that was released yesterday. And there's really two reasons for this call. First, we want to communicate what we know thus far. Recognize there are still an awful lot of unknowns, and we'll talk about those as we go on, but we want to at least give you as much information as we can based on what we know. And the other thing is we really want to listen to your challenges and your questions. And I put listening in quotations because we're limited in being able to have conversational dialogue. Rest assured, every question, every challenge, every comment you send, we are going to be sharing, and we'll be sharing that information with the state of Ohio and the folks that are making some of the decisions. So it's really important that we do hear your questions and that we do hear some of the challenges you're facing. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what is open and when, as well as very clearly define what is not permitted to open thus far. We're going to talk about some overall requirements for businesses to open. This is important because we really think that, there are 5 basic protocol we're all going to be required to do. So we need to understand those. We're going to talk about some industry-specific requirements that right now are required for 3 different industry sectors. We're going to talk about why it's really important for you to plan now for opening later. We're going to give you a couple recommendations you might consider for creating your public health safety plan. And we'll give you a list of resources, including a new marketplace that's been developed with Ohio manufacturers if you're having trouble sourcing cleaning agents and or masks. And then, as I said, we will have a Q&A section, and we really invite you to put any questions you have into that. We also had some questions pre-submitted that we will address. If we don't address them during the webinar, I'll get to them during the Q&A. I want to tell you a little bit about who the Ohio Travel Association is, because it's important that you understand we are a nonprofit organization. We are not a state agency. Our board is comprised of business owners just like you that represent the travel industry. So this is our mission. Together we inspire, champion, empower the advancement of our industry. So it's really important to understand that we are getting this information as you are. But our mission is to do what we can to help the travel industry. And that's why we are offering these webinars and trying to help you make sense of uncertain times. All right, according to the governor's opening that was released yesterday during the press conference, these are the businesses that are going to be opening and when. So May 1st, non-essential healthcare providers, including dentists. Those are for procedures that don't require an overnight stay. May 4th, manufacturing, distribution, construction, as well as general office environments. And May 12th, consumer, retail, and services, which is kind of a really broad term. But I think you're going to get more clarification when we look at the businesses that are to remain closed. Now, understand that there will be public health orders issued on those days if we go back to this list. So there will be a public health order issued May 1. We may find there's more information in there. But what we do know from the state is that these businesses will remain closed. Restaurants and bars, carry-out deliveries permitted, personal appearance, beauty services, health clubs, fitness centers, swimming pools. And then, of course, the entertainment, recreation, gymnasium sites, and they specified this includes, but is not limited to, the following types of businesses. So pretty much, most of the businesses that we view as attractions are included in this list. Spectator sports, recreational sports, organized sports, those are also to remain closed. Residential and day camps are to remain closed. In campgrounds, although it does provide a provision here, excludes people who have part-time residency at some of these campgrounds for the summer months. And we want to do some further clarification of this, but we think this is an expansion of the previous order. If you are unclear as to whether or not you should open, call your local health department. Understand that these are public health orders. So that means your local public health department is the power to be to tell you whether or not you should open. The other link I'm providing here is about dispute resolutions. So let's say, because you have local health departments making some of these decisions, let's say you find out there is a business in one county that their local health department has said they're able to open, but you're in a different county and you've been told you can't open. This is a link where you can submit your complaint or your question, and that will be then, you are able to have some experts with the health department from state perspective mediate those differences. So again, this is not to put complaints or questions. It is very specifically whether or not you should open, whether or not you can provide the services, because you're hearing that there is another entity that's similar to yours that is open. All right, getting to the nitty-gritty, these are the 5 business practices that the governor has proposed as being mandatory for getting back to work. And it's important enough that we're going to go over each one of them in detail, probably numerous times. Okay, 1, require face coverings. Interesting term and use of the term face coverings. And he even said this before. I had a conversation this morning, in fact, with a business that was saying, look, we can't source, PPE. We can't find masks. This doesn't say masks. This says face coverings. And so we've even had conversations with an attraction where they are letting their employees wear their own personal masks because they would rather be assured that the employees will wear them. And if they're comfortable wearing them because they've come up with those masks, they would rather do that than require they all wear a certain type of mask. So it's requiring face coverings for employees and customers at all times. That's the number one requirement. 2, conducting daily health assessments. Notice it says self-evaluation. This doesn't necessarily mean right now, you don't have to do temperature checks. That is not mandatory. What is mandatory is that you have some type of process in place for ensuring that your employees have done some type of self-evaluation. Maybe require them to take their temperature before coming to work and just checking a form that they've done that and that their temperature was normal. Number 3, maintain good hygiene at all times. That includes hand washing and social distancing. And you're going to hear social distancing mentioned so many times right now. 4, clean and sanitize workplaces throughout the workday and at the close of business or between shifts. And 5, limit capacity to meet the social distancing guidelines. Notice that there is a requirement to establish the maximum capacity at 50% of the fire code. So we had a question coming up, what square footage will be, what square footage requirement will there be with regard to the number of people allowed in a small space? That isn't specified here. What is specified is at 50% of the fire code. So let's say you have an open air attraction or environment, but you may have a building. Maybe an exhibit is in a separate building. What is the fire code for that building? Then you have to figure out how to have 50% capacity of that fire code. And they also recommend use appointment setting where possible to limit congestion. We are hearing from a lot of attractions that are actually requiring pre-ticketing, and they are limiting that ticketing so that they know they are within the proper capacity. So in great detail, and the links for all these are going to be provided, they've provided mandatory requirements for the 3 separate industries. We'll just call them industries for right now. They've identified mandatory requirements, but they've also identified some recommended best practices. Here's what we have to remember. Like, we can learn from what has been released so that we can not only be prepared for opening, we can not only start to put some of these things into place, but we can also start to shape some protocols so we can really let the state know that, you know, attractions have done their homework and are ready to go. So if you look at these 3 different sets of requirements, look, all of us have a business operation. So what I would do is I would look at the guidelines for general office environments and I would follow those for my business operations. Regardless of what type of business you are, you all have an office environment at some stage, somewhere. So look at the general office environments, make sure you have those things in place. Second piece of advice when you look at these is you kind of have to think on a modular. So let's say you have, let's say you are a zoo or a museum, but you have a gift shop. Okay, well, you can look at the Consumer Retail and Services Guidelines and get a pretty good idea of what is mandatory for what you're going to need to do in that gift shop. So the last thing is that we can learn from what's required elsewhere. So we understand what is mandatory and what are recommended best practices for these different environments. We know what is likely to be required of us in the future. So it's important enough that I'm going to go over at least the general office environment requirements and the retail sections, just because I think there's some additional information we can learn. So if you notice that when we talk about what is required, these are what is mandatory for employees and guests in a general office environment, is to ensure proper physical distancing. And that has been highlighted in every one of those sheets. So understand that having that 6-foot difference between people is going to be really, really important. And if you aren't able to ensure a minimum of 6 feet between people, regardless of your business, then can you install barriers? Personnel should work from home when possible. Another really important key. So just because they're saying general office operations can start doesn't mean you should. So personnel should work from home whenever possible. If you're able to continue working from home, they're advising to continue. Again, having employees perform daily symptom assessments, requiring employees to stay home if symptomatic. This means you may have to look at your personnel policies and make sure that those have been updated with the times. Face coverings, it doesn't say masks, remember, it says face coverings. Require regular hand washing, reduce sharing of work materials, limit travel, stagger arrival, and post signage. What are best practices for the general office environment? Once again, look how they've highlighted. Ensure seating distance of 6 feet, look at ventilation, health questionnaire for symptoms, temperature taking protocols. These are things that are best practices. These are not mandatory. If we look at your physical space for a general office environment, what's mandatory is going to be frequent disinfection of desks, workstations, and high contact surfaces, daily disinfection of common areas, canceling or postponement of in-person events when you're not able to comply with the 6-foot distancing requirement, no buffets in cafeterias. All right, so what can we learn from this? Even though we have not seen restaurant guidelines, we now have a pretty good clue that buffets are not going to be allowed. Look at the next one, using disposable tableware and other materials also could be indicative. And once again, what is required? A maximum capacity at 50% of the fire code. If we look at best practices for physical spaces, redesigning the workstations for 6 feet or more, close cafeteria and gathering spaces if possible, limit congregation, divide essential staff, and availability of at least 3 weeks of cleaning supplies. I think that's a really good one. So those give us an idea of what will be required for our business operations. All right, we look at retail. What is required of retail? Minimum of 6 feet between people, and if not possible, install barriers. So making sure that that 6 foot, and I'm talking like all the way around a person. So imagine a 6-foot bubble. So again, very similar to before, where you have some requirements for your employees, face coverings, hand washing, hand sanitizer available. And the next one's even more interesting, clean high touch items after each use. So what can we learn from this? Well, if you have an operation where people are touching a surface, all the time, how are you going to clean that surface between each use? And if you're not able to clean between each use, can you remove that interaction completely? And best practices for retail. There was only one when it came to employees and guests. What is required? Other things required, 6 feet between people, specify hours for at-risk populations. Now understand this is for retail. This is something for many of our businesses will frankly be impossible to do as an attraction, but it's something we need to think about, and we need to figure out a way to keep the at-risk population safe. Hand sanitizers, asking customers and guests not to enter if symptomatic, face coverings, staggering entries. And what are the best practices? Again, these aren't required, but these are best practices. Health questionnaires for symptoms, provide face coverings where possible, accept customers by appointment only, increase availability for curbside, consider suspending return policies, and group employees by shifts to reduce exposure. Physical places for retail services. Again, 6-foot distancing, posting the signs for physical distancing, and disinfect high contact surfaces hourly. So now we're getting a little more specific on what's going to be required there. Clean merchandise before stocking if possible. Establish maximum capacity at 50% of fire code. Discontinue self-service food stations and product samples. And close the food courts. So again, although we may not, each of us specifically, be a retail establishment, we can learn from what is being required of retail services to know what's likely to be required of us. And best practices for retail, not mandatory. So what they're saying, best practices, close once a week for deep cleaning, maximize available checkout space, contactless payments, increase capacity for curbsides. The other thing that's included in the requirements are the procedures that must be done when a COVID-19 infection is identified. So that is spelled out as far as details of what will need to be done if you have, in this case, an employee or a customer. It'd be hard for us to really detect whether or not a customer has been positively identified on the spot, but from an employee perspective, these are the steps you're going to have to take if an employee is diagnosed with COVID-19. What we need to do, each and every one of us, is create a plan, create a public safety plan. And the number one reason we need to do this is to keep our employees and our customers safe. That is the priority. That is the number one reason why we have to do a plan. And if you think about it in those terms, the issue of whether or not to do a plan isn't because we need to be compliant and open. It's about doing what we need to do in the tourism industry to keep our workers and the public safe. And I think that is the most important aspect that we need to think about as we start developing strategies for our own businesses. Another reason why this is very important is the fact that we're starting to see research that's saying, look, our customers are going to demand it. I was just on a call this morning where there is a survey. It hasn't been released yet, but what we're hearing is that museum guests, quite possibly, like, they're going to want to see you in action cleaning. So we're in the business where we create these experiences that are seamless, right? So whether or not you're an attraction or whatever you may be, the fact is we create these experiences. But what we're hearing and what we're hearing customers say is going to be important for them is that they're going to want to see your cleaning crews. They want to know what you're doing at your business to keep them safe. And that means communicating what you're doing as well as not hiding it, which is a little different than many of us have operated in the past. Another thing I found really interesting, because I like to look at other industries and other products and then see what we can learn from them. This just came out, survey about what's happening in China right now and how people are choosing to purchase a new car. And what's interesting is that a healthy configuration, meaning a good ventilation surface and easy to clean surfaces, and the fact that the car itself is just gonna minimize infection is now rating as a higher consideration than even vehicle safety. That's so weird. But I think what we're seeing is that the confidence that businesses they go to and experiences they have are going to be safe, and at least that the businesses is making an effort is going to be extremely important. If it's important in buying a new car, just think how important it's going to be for our industry. So how do you create a plan? Well, these are some things that we've been thinking about at the Ohio Travel Association, and kind of understand we're all going through this at the same time. So there isn't a roadmap laid out, but we're starting to kind of create this roadmap and to provide you maybe with some things to think about. The thing is, no one is going to come out and give you specific guidelines for your business. They're going to give guidelines, but each and every one of you has a different business model, has a different experience. And so you really need to think about creating a plan using these 5 requirements that have now been shared, right? Face coverings, health assessments, hygiene, cleaning, and physical distancing. So understanding that those are the 5 tools you have and that you're going to have to use, but you need to really develop a plan that's going to keep your customers, your employees, and your vendors safe. And that may be through policies or procedures. So let's look at the health assessments. So if you're looking to keep your employees safe, there's going to have to be some policies that you have in place that you communicate with your employees, but there's also going to have to be procedures. And maybe that's more frequent breaks so they can, do hand washing, all of those different things. So what we're suggesting is that you view whatever business you're in, whatever experience you're offering, from 3 vantage points: from the customer journey, from your employees, and from even your vendors who are making deliveries. And one of the things we're suggesting is consider even role playing or virtual role playing, even if you're working from home right now, and look at, let's just take the customer journey for an example. Imagine you're your customer coming into your business, and imagine that journey through your experience, through your business. And where are the points of contact with either an object or another person? And then how do you activate those 5 things to keep that interaction safe? And if you can't keep that interaction safe, then get rid of it. Is there a way you can completely reduce that interaction? For example, ticketing. We're seeing more and more, we're hearing from people going to pre-ticketing or using a digital platform. So again, if you're not able to keep that transaction to a minimum, can you eliminate it by converting to a digital? And we really think you need to think about all 3 of those groups and develop a plan that addresses all 3 of those things. One example, and we have a copy that we're going to be sending to you, Wynn Hotels in Las Vegas. So, and this is just as an example, this is just a sample, but they did, a really thorough plan. And they have 3 protocols for each of their departments. For every single one of their departments, they're addressing cleaning and sanitizing, what they're going to use, how frequently, what services get cleaned more often. They're looking at physical distancing, and they're looking at guest considerations. So I had a call with an attraction yesterday, and they realized, this person said, we realize we can't police how our guests are going to behave. And that is so true. So what can you do to minimize some of those things? So here are just some samples of some things that we have heard from you just in the last week of some different things that have been done. We have heard from several going to more of a paperless environment, so no receipts, doing digital receipts or no receipts. So if you have like maybe a map, a paper map, we're hearing from one that they're putting up signs next to their big sign of a map that says, take a photo of this. So instead of distributing maps, they're providing the means for people to take photos of what they're going to need later. Digital purchasing, right? Ticketing wherever possible. We are hearing that some attractions may adjust their pricing due to the changed experience. You know, the important thing, again, go back to the number one reason, keeping our workers and our employees safe. And if there are pieces of your experience that you just don't know right now how you're going to keep safe, then maybe you don't open that right away. Maybe you look at your business and consider phasing openings even within the business. Eliminating self-service stations. We know that's going to be a requirement. So where in your business model do you have people maybe, you know, walking up to a cooler and getting a drink and then taking it to the checkout? How can you eliminate that? Some attractions are reporting that staffing has been reduced because there will be less need if they have fewer things open. But others are saying they're likely going to see more employees because they're going to need the manpower for cleaning. Become friends with your local health department. Again, these orders that are coming down are from the public health. So understanding and having open communications with your local health department, looking to them for advice or even to review, you know, your plan once you have it developed will be really important. So no switchback queues. If you're an attraction, understand again that 6 foot distancing that's going to be required. So that just doesn't mean 6 feet in front of you and 6 feet in back of you. It also means keeping people at a distance beside you. And so if you don't have room to have straight lines for your queuing, be a little creative. Is there a way to wind the queuing as long as you have that 6 foot distance maintained? Look at the traffic pattern. So could you change the traffic pattern of your business and maybe convert it to a one-way traffic pattern in some places to better manage the personal distancing, to better manage, you know, avoiding the congregation around certain exhibits. Again, not every building or experience needs to open at the start. So if and when, you know, I shouldn't say yeah, we will reopen. Like, let's just put it out there. We will reopen. When we are reopening, understand that doesn't mean you have to open everything. Again, if you aren't comfortable, that's a business decision, and businesses can take a look at what they have. Look at plastic barriers where guest interactions can't be eliminated. So I was talking to a campground yesterday, and there is an area where they have to have public interaction. So they put a barrier between their employees and the guests. That's in addition to the masks. So, you know, what we have to do is assume, and we've heard the governor say this, assume every person is carrying the virus. And so how do you layer all these different barriers, masks, personal distancing, disinfectant, all of those things into the experience to keep people safe? So dividing the cleaning responsibility between operations and guest services. We talked to an attraction this week that said, look, you know, typically they would have cleaning be performed by maintenance in operations, and maybe they would do that at night. Well, now they understand that they're going to have to do it more frequently throughout the day. So they're actually going to be training their guest services folks to do it as well. So maybe your maintenance and operations can do the deep cleaning in the evening, but the guest services are going to be seen doing it all the time. Because again, the customers are likely going to demand that. If you can't clean a surface between touches, eliminate the touch. So this becomes important. Let's say you have like a exhibit, but you have maybe a, I don't know, a glass between the exhibit, and maybe, you know, the kids come up and they touch the glass, they touch the glass. Is there a way to even rope it off so that the likelihood of them touching that glass isn't as prevalent? And we've talked to others who are alternating days of operation between opening, and then maybe they'll be open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but they're going to clean Tuesday, Thursday. That's how another attraction is thinking about doing it. We have some specific concerns that we are still, we're going to continue to research. We're going to continue to, you know, dig deeper and find some answers. One is the liability. So we need some answers on that is business operators on the liability surrounding this. I don't know that anyone has a clear answer of that right now. I think we need to look at contact tracing, and we've heard from the governor that they're going to be doing more consistent contact tracing. So in other words, if someone is diagnosed with COVID-19, they are going to look at where that person has had close interactions with others. Then they're going to contact those people and have them tested. And this is an important part of the state's arsenal for controlling this virus. Our concern is that, you know, we need to have a better understanding of what close contact means. And because many of our businesses don't necessarily keep names and emails and phone numbers of every person that walks through our doors, what happens if someone visits our business, 2 days later they're diagnosed, the health department comes back to our business and wants a list of everyone who was there and who could have had contact with that person. We don't want that announcement to go to the media. We would prefer to figure out a way to control that. And if that means having our businesses take an extra step to secure contacts for folks, then so be it. Sourcing materials is a challenge. Again, looking at it just from the concept of a mask, we've now seen the language being used by the governor change from mask to face coverings. And I think this is reflective of the fact that we don't have adequate supplies of maybe the manufactured masks. So we're going to provide a link in a minute about a new possible place that you might be able to find some of this materials. And we need to talk about messaging about what you're doing. We've said it's important. Customers are going to want to know. They are going to want, it is not about cleaning up and making this look pretty. It is about give them specifics. What are you doing to keep your guests and your workers safe? But what we are hearing as far as a best practice, never, ever, ever claim you're COVID free. We can't control that. So we can talk about what safety protocols we have in place, but you need to be very cautious about, you know, overextending your promise because there's just too much uncertainty. This is the link I promised, the Ohio Manufacturers Retooling and Repurposing. That's a big, that is a big title, but the link is there, repurposing project. Understand it is not just about masks. You will find some materials on here that are specific to healthcare, but you're also going to find some signs for the floor. You're going to find the plastic barriers. You're going to find some masks. You're going to find some disinfectant. So we will share this link, and it is particularly, I think, geared towards providing supplies to small businesses. When you go to this link, make sure you go to the other category, because that's where you're going to find some of the tools and goods and services that I think our industry will probably get the most use out of. Different resources we're going to provide for you. There is a link to the COVID page for Ohio and the restart plan. So every one of the guidelines that I've detailed for you, we will have that information out, or that link will take you to it. Our website, we do daily updates. So if you just want to know what's happened today, like check our website every night. It gives you a description of things, and we filtered it for things that are specific to what our industry needs to know. But we also have some economic research, help for businesses, a lot of other things. The National Restaurant Association has developed some proposed guidelines, and the Ohio Restaurant Association just sent these guidelines to the governor yesterday. And so this would be a good link to understand, in all likelihood, what might be required of restaurants. Again, this isn't confirmed, but this is what the Ohio Restaurant Association has sent to the governor to consider. American Hotel and Lodging Association has also created some possible guidelines. So I think, what we are starting to see is sector by sector, some are really starting to look at their individual business models and develop some proposed guidelines. What's really important for all of us to remember, though, is from an attraction standpoint, we run the gamut. I mean, we have people on the call who are ferry boats, who are plane ride operators, who are zip lines, who are museums, who are theme parks, who are zoos. So it is very difficult for us to come up with one set of criteria for each individual type of attraction. What we know we can do is if we focus on that customer journey, if we focus on these employees, and we focus on the vendors, that we can develop some protocols that are likely going to work for all of us. However, each of you individually is going to have to look at your customer journey, your employees, in the interaction they have with your customers and your vendors, and how they're making deliveries. We heard the Lieutenant Governor say earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, it's kind of all turning into a blur, but he said, there are two things we need to do as businesses, as a business community, and that is be consistent in our protocols and vigilant. So even though you may get, at some point, you look at the retail strategies and it gives you 5 or 6 things, and we may get to the point where we have 5 or 6 things outlined. That's minimum. Like, if we keep the safety of our visitors and our employees as number one, that's what we need to focus on. And it means vigilant. It means looking above and beyond what may be required. What do we need to do to make our environments and our interactions safe? We are going to open it up for questions. I'm going to ask Kelly to grab my screen so I can look through some of these questions more easily. So it's going to be a little... We've got some other questions. While I'm sourcing through these, I will go over some of the questions that came in earlier. There was a question about, can I operate small group city walking tours if social distancing measures are taken? That's a really good question, and understand a lot of my answers are going to be, I don't know. We don't, again, so many different business models, they're not going to be so specific. My guess is right now, no. However, because it's going to be seen as an attraction and an entertainment activity. However, what I am going to do is send that question up to Lieutenant Governor's office and, try to get some answers. And if we don't have answers about that today, I doubt if I can get it so quickly, but we will get the information out to you. There was another question related to, and that was involving plane rides. And does that count as retail? No, that doesn't count as retail. That also would be as an attraction and amusement. And so that would fall in the same category. But I'm really glad you asked that question, because we can put that now in our list when we start to say these are the types of businesses who need help and who need to know what to do. There was a question that came in about what is the timeline, right? So many of you had that question. When are we going to open? We don't know. We know what is open now, and even those openings are staggered. What we're hearing from the governor is that they are going to wait until after those businesses are operating and doing what they need to do and complying with what's required. And then they're going to see what has happened with public safety before they'll make future decisions. So there isn't even a timeline for knowing when the timeline will be introduced. So at this point, what we can do, and I always like to think of, okay, what can we do that can make us prepare? And that's what we should be doing, is at least developing some of the guidelines for that. There was the question about festivals and concerts and sporting events. Probably in all likelihood going to be the last. Understand it's also about mass gatherings, and there is a special task force that is looking at guidelines for mass gatherings right now. So there is activity. There are people from some of our major sporting leagues, as well as some major attractions in the state, that are talking about the mass gatherings and are starting to pull together some protocols. So that activity is happening. We just don't have any details about that yet. There was a question about how do we handle customers who are not masked? Oh boy, that's a really good question. You know, I think it's very clear from the requirements that are coming in is they expect customers and employees to be masked. You know, that's a tough question. Like, how do you police that? You have the ability as a business owner to refuse admittance. If that means you create, you know, can you even have, one idea would be even like a digital policy that says, you know, I'm entering your business. I commit to maintaining 6 feet distance and to wear my mask. And if they're not willing to sign that document, then you as a business don't have to admit them. But that's going to be a really tricky thing to tackle. And that's something we can start to explore from a best practices standpoint. There was a question that came in from a business that is open right now because they're doing carry out and delivery. And so they're not required to do some of the things that are being listed currently. But the question is, will they be required to do that later? Yes. And the governor was very clear on that. He said there are some businesses operating right now as essential that are going to have to follow by the same protocols that were just released yesterday. There was a comment that came in, said so many medical experts keep saying that the cotton homemade masks give you 2% protection. Love to see the governor address the effectiveness of each mask type. That, right? I mean, I'm no health expert, so I can't really answer that question, but I think that is a really good thought. What I have seen and what the governor has talked about is the fact that you have to look at layering all these protective measures on top of each other. So if your business, you know, if you're wearing a mask and your business is disinfecting and your business is providing barriers and your business is complying with the personal distancing, it's all those things added together. So the effectiveness of the masks are just part of the equation and are helpful. If you are retail and a family group comes in, they are obviously not social distancing. Are you required to police them to be 6 feet apart? That hasn't come into play, but I know I've talked to attractions who are, for instance, in the restaurant area, or maybe not even restaurant. I think they're starting to think about it from a restaurant perspective, but they're creating more pods, like recognizing that no, you know, family members are not going to be required to social distance. Like, it's going to be tricky because how can you tell when you've got a family and when you don't? There's only so much we can do as business operators to, again, police our customers. But can you create the environments so it makes them easier to comply? In this case, this attraction is looking at creating different pods of seating, recognizing people don't come to an attraction alone. They're going to come with other people. Make sure the pods are 6 feet apart, and maybe there's sign that says, please stay with your family, right, while you enjoy this space. What about gloves? I hear nothing about using or finding them. Are they necessary? Not according to the governor's protocol. Again, go straight from the governor's protocol and what's required. And at this point, the gloves aren't required. Could they be required for food service? Perhaps, but they're required anyway for parts of food service. So with all the loss of income already, how are small businesses to afford all of this? I know it's tricky. Recognize that not all of it requires money. So, you know, masking, you know, I have a mask made from a bandana. That doesn't necessarily require a lot of money. Personal distancing doesn't, you know, that you can think about just from a standpoint. So not, you know, saying everything costs a lot of money. There's lots of things we can do that don't cost a lot of money. And we're hoping that there will be some assistance coming in. There's talk about that. And we're going to continue to talk about that. But refusing to do something based on the fact that you can't afford it, then we can't open. So how can we afford not to do it? Look, what we're hearing, and this has been coming down from the governors, is that we should anticipate doing this for 12 to 18 months. So any investment you make to open your business is not going to be a short term. It's going to mean whether or not you're open. And so you really have to look at it from that point of view. Now, the other thing to remember is everything we say today could change based on what they find works in the future. So I think as we go, we're going to see different things recommended based on what they know, because there's ongoing science. What is the status of leisure travels? Leisure travel, hotels and lodgings are open to essential travel, but never has leisure been specifically addressed by the governor or ODH. It has, in the sense that it's not essential travel. So essential travel, leisure travel necessarily isn't essential. So, you know, are we to the point? And I don't think it's going to be like a green light, boom, you know, you can travel for leisure. Part of it is going to be us, as the changes are implemented, as businesses are slowly opening, we're going to venture outside a little more. And I don't know that we're ever going to see, like, maybe I'm wrong, but yes, you may now travel for leisure. Well, you know, if I could even go to Walmart right now, like, that would be leisure. So I think our definition of leisure travel will change. And we've covered that in previous webinars we've done. We also have a new series of travel marketing and market webinars that are going to start up, where we're getting more specific into the demand side. How will the state of Ohio communicate with people coming in from other states? That I do not know. I can ask that question. and whether or not they will be prepared to cover their faces when they arrive. Oh, that's a good question. So maybe you do need to have a small supply of masks at your business for those people who don't come in equipped. But I do know there's a lot of collaboration between the states. I had a conversation with Matt McLaren this morning with Tourism Ohio, and they're exploring what the different policies for reopening are with all the different states surrounding us. There's not going to be a great variance in the fact that, you know, masks are going to be required. They're just part of our fashion statement. And so, but to make sure they are starting to look at when other states around us are opening and what will be required of them. Visitor centers or general offices, are we able to open? Well, should you open? That's the question you need to ask. Are we able to open? Sure. You know, as a business environment, you're able to open. Would I open your visitor center? No. But why would you right now? So you really need to think about why the actions you're doing. Understand, even with the general office environment, they are saying right now for people to stay at home if they can. So if you're able to work from home, then you're supposed to stay at home. Our office, the Ohio Travel Association, we're staying home. Just because we're a general office doesn't mean I should be open. So I think that part of the protocol you really need to think about. And it kind of gets hidden, but the fact that you should work from home if you can stay at home. What if we share a common entry in restrooms, shared spaces, rely on property management, or make your own plan or combination? I would say if you have a shared space, you do a combination with your property management, because honestly, there are some things they should be doing as entities. So I don't think that burden should fall all on you. And they should have a plan. So if I were you, I would contact your property manager and ask to see their plan. That way, if they don't have one necessarily right now, they're thinking about it. Any word about if wineries will be grouped with restaurants? Great question. Haven't heard anything, but I will, and same thing with breweries, right? So I'll reach out to our friends there, see if they've heard any discussion of that. And again, if we think about those protocols as modulars, then it kind of helps us make sense of this, if we can make any sense of it. In that, you know, restaurant protocols, when they're released, well, that could be applied to a restaurant perspective in food service of a winery or a craft brewery. But there may be specific guidelines for the wineries or the craft breweries as far as production. Breweries have not heard whether we get considered as restaurants. Thank you. That came from Mary McDonald, who was on the call with Ohio Craft Breweries. Thank you for that. Let me see, there's a few others. Recommendations on how to handle public restrooms in attraction venues. Wow, that's something we should have some discussions on. I know from those that I've talked to, they have just upped that, you know, cleaning pretty much nonstop in those public restrooms. Do we need to have masks, face coverings available for the public? Again, you don't have to have them available for the public. Most people will be coming. What we are hearing is you make sure that in your communications that you're telling them face coverings are required. So that would be part of your communications. I've heard from one attraction that's looking into some of the AM radio broadcasts. So, or because we're doing a lot of pre-ticketing, they're able to send the guidelines and saying, yes, your visit is confirmed for this date. And, you know, you need to, you know, these are the rules we're going to ask you to follow, and face coverings are one of them. So as you consider guest interactions and what you're going to require of guests, think about how you can communicate that to them prior to, so they're not surprised. Because they addressed it, if you look at it from the retail guidelines, they addressed saying it would be required, but they didn't really address how to implement that. And that's where it's going to be up to all of us to figure out a way to implement. Another question came in, what about brochure racks, especially in public places? Should we just cover them up? Well, right now, like they're, that's an interesting question. I think from a visitor center perspective, we know our visitor center shouldn't be open right now. But, I think you need to consider how you're going to address those brochure racks in the future. Whether to cover them up, I don't know, but that's a really good question. Of course, if you have the ability, and most of our vendors and suppliers are willing to work with you, so I would contact them and see if there's options for providing that information, even digital. But for right now, like that isn't really a requirement right now, because we shouldn't even have those visitor centers open. I would like to know what most offices are going to do. Since the governor said stay at home if possible, should we wait as long as possible to open an office, or think about opening May 4th or 12th? Understand, the order is not even coming out until May 1st, and another one May 4th, and another one May 12th. And that order is going to say you must work from home if at all possible. So these orders are coming out. What he did was give us a preview and kind of an early glimpse at what is included in those orders. But again, the reality is that he still wants us to be working from home if we are able to conduct business from home. Let's see, what other questions do I have? So there was a question that came in, which I absolutely loved. How can we best support each other now and through reopening? And that is something we at the Ohio Travel Association have been talking about on a daily basis. So we really, really, really would like us to start talking about best practices and, being able to figure out a way, because I think we can learn from each other a lot. So keep your ears open for, what we may have coming out. I do know that we have been asked to participate in discussions to develop protocols for many of your businesses, which is fantastic. But we want to hear from you. We want your feedback. So that's why you're going to see probably us reaching out to you more with questions, with ideas, with challenges. So we know we have the ability to address some of those things. But I think the fact that we've been asked to participate is a good sign. The fact that discussions are being had, we may not know specifically when, but we know the discussions are being had. There was a question on rules for breakfast or free breakfast for hotels. Again, the restaurant rules haven't been specified. So we know self-service is probably going to be limited. We know buffets are probably going to be prohibited. And we know, perhaps one-use utensils, but we don't know specifics yet. So I would look at the links I provided, and I will provide you in the PDF for hotels and restaurants, to see if you can pick up some tips there. Oh yeah. Here's two questions. I get it. There was one question about the constitutionality of these rules. Also, people complaining in communities. I get it. You know, like I am not a lawyer. I am not making these rules. What I'm doing is communicating what we've been told. So I think we all need to talk and think about, you know, the fact that you know, we may have guests, we may have visitors that refuse to comply. You know, we're bringing this to you because we want you to open. And if we're not able to do this, then we can't open. So, you know, the whole constitutionality of it, that's not what we're looking at right now. We're just trying to tell you specifically what we're being told and how to prepare you. But as a business that invites people in, I would have some, you know, internal discussions, maybe build some scenarios. What if you get people who refuse to comply? You know, and that is going to be, you have to make sure that your people are trained to handle that situation, that you know what to do, because I think that will be an issue. But we'll look into some of those things as well for you. Oh, we heard from our friend Bill Prepira at AAA. On the upside, he's found that there's still strong desire to travel. Most aren't canceling, they are postponing. Yes, you know, there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand. So we do think that there's going to be, you know, shifts in what they're wanting to do. But again, having a plan in place for how to keep the public safe and to address this could be the difference between, you know, getting that customer to walk in your door or not. Any other questions? Boy, that was a lot of questions. And if I missed any, I so apologize. I'm doing my best to weed through these. But I think that is it. I want to thank all of you for participating. Will the audio, the session be available? Probably, Kelly, I think we can do that. We are recording it as long as the recording's working, and it looks like the little red button is still blinking at me. So I think we should be able to provide that. But the other thing we found is really helpful is just a Q&A that will accompany the slides and the live recording. So that way, if I've missed any of your questions, we'll be sure to answer those as concisely as possible. So at this point, we will conclude the webinar. Oh, I should say, my email is at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions whatsoever, please email me, and I am happy to answer your questions. Thank you.